Hi everybody and welcome to Heel Heat. My name is George Coles and on this episode we're going to do It Came From the Network. The topic of this It Came From the Network, WWF Monday Night Raw Season 6 Episode 13 as it's shown on Peacock from March 30th, 1998. Now the reason that I picked this episode is right now we're less than a week out from the first night of WrestleMania. This is a Raw the night after WrestleMania 14. To me, this is the best Raw after WrestleMania episode of Raw. And one that I really think set the bar for what you could expect from these shows. Before we get into this, if you haven't seen the show before, we grade everything on a 1 to 5 scale, 1 being the worst, 5 being the best. Let's jump right in. We get Vince McMahon in the middle of the ring. He's calling out Steve Austin, who the night before won the WWF Championship, and I'm going to say WWF because that's what it was called at the time. And I'm probably going to interchange that with WWE several times because it's the same company. Vince basically tells Austin, we could either do this my way, your way, the easy way, the hard way. Austin says, give him a few seconds. Hits the stunner on Vince. Normally, I don't rate these, but I'm trying to do a little bit more, especially if they're significant. Any interaction with Vince McMahon and Steve Austin is fantastic. I'm giving this a 5 because it really set off what Stone Cold's championship run was going to look like. After this, I'm not going to review these because they were just short. After this, every match for the next couple matches, there were little updates about Vince calling the police department and wanting to get Austin arrested, basically. I digress. Coming off of that, and I gave that segment a 5, by the way. Coming off of that, we get the LOD 2000, which is the Legion of Doom with Sunny, and they have slightly different attire, and they don't have their trademark hairstyles. Animal's more of a buzz cut. Hawk has his hair grown out a little bit. And they're going up against, from Los Boricuas, Jesus Castillo and Jose Estrada, two of the lesser known members of Los Boricuas. This was a short match. It was basically re-emphasizing the Road Warriors or Legion of Doom, who just came back to the company the night before as a surprise in the Tag Team Battle Royal that they had. Legion of Doom picks up the win in a very quick match. This was your typical Legion of Doom match. I'm giving it a 5. Just because of who they are and what they did here, this is exactly what you would expect from that. Now, jumping from that, going right to our next match of the evening. And one thing that strikes me, and you're going to see it as I'll talk about it here, I don't think there's a match all night that's more than 5 minutes, which is interesting. Because I'll talk about that at the end here. But anyway, I digress. We go back to the next match, which is Kurgan, who's with the Jackal, a.k.a. Don Callis, versus Chains, a.k.a. the fake Undertaker, a.k.a. Brian Lee. Kurgan, they tried. And he was okay. He probably could have benefited from having a long stint in a developmental territory or being in the territory system. A little bit clunky. Kurgan picks up the win here with his claw into a pin and then kind of keeps the claw on and drags Chains to the back. I'm going to give this a 2 here. The match was clunky. It was short. With everything you see on the rest of this card, it is definitely the low point of the night. But I can't blame Kurgan. I think he could have benefited from more time and some kind of developing his character. After that, we get the Double J Jeff Jarrett with Tennessee Lee. Jeff Jarrett comes out on a horse, all in the dark, or at least it looks like a silhouette of a horse. It's all in dark. All you can see is the lights. This is when he had to light up JJ stuff on him. He's going up against Aguila, who would go on to be Papi Chulo, a.k.a. S.A. Rios. this was a decent match. Again, another short match. Jeff Jarrett picks up the win here. It's a highlight for him, basically. After the match, we have Steve Blackman coming out, kind of chasing off Jeff Jarrett, which then we get to the meat of the situation in this segment, where you have Steve Austin actually getting arrested. For the match, I'm going to give that a 3. The Austin arrest I tie into the beginning thing. Like I said, it's all tied into one thing. That's all a 5 already. For the match, I give it a 3. Jeff Jarrett's a really great wrestler. A lot of people give him a lot of... there's a lot of negativity out about him based on his TNA run, which actually I think he was pretty good in there as well. But during this time, he was probably one of the 4 or 5 better wrestlers on the card. And that's hard to say when you can see how stacked this card is and how many absolute legends are on there. We come back from break. Vince addresses Steve Austin getting arrested. Him and Slaughter and Briscoe are out. And we go right into our next match, which is the aforementioned Steve Blackman tag teaming with Ken Shamrock versus Farouk and The Rock, who do a little promo before the match to representing the Nation of Domination. Rock basically compliments Farouk, saying he's the reason that The Rock is who he is. Rock plays up the injury from the night before where Shamrock wouldn't let go of the ankle lock and ended up getting disqualified because of it. So Rock plays up the injury, doesn't tag into Farouk. Shamrock and Blackman pick up the win. After the match, Farouk calls out The Rock to kind of have a fight, basically, get his comeuppance. This is when we see the Nation of Domination turn on Farouk and basically beat him down, leading to The Rock leading the Nation of Domination, which is, again, one of the, we had, like I said, we already had a quasi-debut, a second match in with the Legion of Doom, re-debuting. We get a reshuffling of the Nation of Domination here, which is kind of prophetic to what's going to happen next. I'm giving this a 5. I thought it was really good. The storytelling aspect, the way it moved on to what's going to happen next, really excellent. Shifting from Farouk, aka Ron Simmons, to The Rock being the leader of the Nation. Thought it was a really good showing. I thought it was a really cool way to do that. Now, coming off a break, we have one of the most talked about and probably one of the most important segments in the Attitude Era in the Monday Night Wars. We get Triple H and China coming to the ring, talking about taking over DX, talking about reorganizing DX, which they bring out. He does the promo, which if you haven't seen it, I'm sure most of you that are watching this have. He says, you got to go to your blood, you got to go to your clique. Brings out Sean Waltman, just calls him the Kid here. I don't think that they had settled on what his name was going to be yet. I don't know if I didn't recognize them calling him X-Pac here or later on in the night. So I don't believe they decided on his name. Kid shoots a quasi work shoot promo. Again, one of the most important moments in the Monday Night Wars, in my opinion. I thought this was an awesome segment. A good way to move away from the Shawn Michaels-led DX to a Triple H-led DX. Kind of similar to what The Rock taking over the Nation. You get a younger guy that's coming into control over something that was already established with an established star. Farouk and Shawn Michaels being the established stars. So we start to see again more of Triple H and The Rock on their ascent towards the top of the card. I'm giving this segment here a 5. I thought it was awesome. Like I said, one of the greatest moments in Monday Night Raw history, in my opinion. Next, we get a vignette for Val Venus, which was short and sweet. Again, kind of awesome seeing where we are in the Attitude Era and some of the luminaries of the Attitude Era and how important this specific show was to a lot of them. The Vince and Austin feud, Nation, Triple H, like I said, Val Venus, foretelling of his debut coming up soon. So another really cool little vignette there, which leads us to our next match. Mark Marrow, who's in the Marvelous Mark Marrow gimmick at this point, versus Takami Shinoku. Mark Marrow still has Sable, but they're kind of teasing the split there. They're kind of making him the overbearing, doesn't want Sable to show off her assets, which every fan in the crowd wants her to be Sable, and Sable seemed to like taking her clothes off. Marrow picks up the win here. We get, and I do apologize. I forget if it was before or after the match, but Luna Vachon comes out, challenges Sable to, I believe it was before. She challenges Sable to an evening gown match, which would later be called a bra and panties match. Sable accepts, which again leads into that storyline. So we got another furthering of a storyline here. After the match, after Mark Marrow picks up the win, we see a debuting, not mentioned by name, Kane attacking Takami Shinoku. So again, some more of your storylines for the Attitude Era. Another group debuting here. I'm giving this segment a 3. I thought it was good. I thought it was solid. The match was good. Mark Marrow is a little bit underrated. Takami Shinoku, everybody considers him a legend at this point. I thought it was a good segment, a good way to bring in a new group like Kai. Interesting, and again, when I do the recap, I'm going to talk more about stuff like this. But I thought it was good. I thought it was solid. Coming off of that, our next match of the evening, the New Midnight Express, Bodacious Bob Holly and Bombastic Bart Gunn, I believe that's what they were calling them, versus the Headbangers for the NWA Tag Team Championship. The New Midnight Express had Jim Cornette and Dan Severn with them. The New Midnights pick up the win here, probably the highlight of the New Midnight Express run. This wasn't bad, and I think if you would have called the team anything other than the New Midnight Express, anytime you put the new in front of something, it's doomed not to work. The New Rockers, the New Blackjacks, the New Midnight Express, it never really works. This was a good match, though. Headbangers are a good team, and so is the New Midnight Express. Like I said, I think if you would have put them under a different name, you probably would have had more success, because both of the guys, I think, are talented wrestlers. Bob Holly would go on to be Hardcore Holly. Bart Gunn would go on to have a good run over in All Japan Pro Wrestling. This is a good, solid match. New Midnights win the tag titles, or the NWA tag titles. I'm going to give this one a 3. Next up, we have a time filler segment with Kane and Paul Bearer coming out and cutting a promo on the stage, basically so they could build the cage at the time. This was the old blue cage. This was prior to the cage lowering from the ceiling where they would set it up in advance. This is when they would actually have to go out and put each side up individually, and it would take about 10-15 minutes. So they had to cover that with a Kane and Paul Bearer promo, which sets up the match that you're going to see in Unforgiven, with Kane versus The Undertaker in an Inferno match. Again, another part and another cog in the Attitude Era, another major cog in Kane, who hadn't been in the WWE. I don't even think he was in WWE as the Kane character for more, I believe it was less than a year at this point. And you can see already that they're building him up as a main tier guy and a main guy in their company. Coming from that, we get the main event of the evening, a tag team match for the WWF tag team titles in a cage. There was controversy over how Cactus Jack and Chainsaw Charlie won the titles. They didn't put the New Age Outlaws in the proper dumpster in the dumpster match from WrestleMania 14, so this is a rematch in a cage. This was a solid match. Again, it's a less than 5 minutes. Every match on this card is less than 5 minutes long, which isn't bad at times. I don't think you have to have a long match for it to be a good match. I think you can fit a match in under 5 minutes and tell a story and have it be good. The story of this match is basically the introduction of the New Age Outlaws, Road Dogg and Billy Gunn, to be part of the new DX or DX Army, as it was called. And X-Pac and Triple H come down and basically help them. They lay a beat down to Cactus and Chainsaw Charlie. which leads to Cactus turning back to Mankind and going to corporate Mankind, because the next week he talks about how the fans, while he was getting beat down, were chanting for Austin instead of chanting for him and Terry Funk. This was a solid match. Like I said, it advanced the D-Generation X story. It gave us a jumping off point where, okay, it's not Shawn Michaels DX anymore. It's a new DX where Triple H is in control, and Triple H is now a major player. Thought it was really solid. I'm giving this a 5. And a couple things I wanted to talk about. Like I said, every match on this was short. The promos and vignettes between this, you had coherent storylines like the Austin and Vince McMahon storyline weaved all the way in and out through the show. Interviews made sense. Everything seemed to keep going. I think at this time they were really hitting on all cylinders. The Vinces and Ed Ferrara, Vince Russo, Vince McMahon, Ed Ferrara, whoever else was involved in creative, Jim Ross in picking the talent, because there's amazing talent on this list. I mean, if you think about it, the number of all Hall of Famers: Steve Austin, Vince McMahon, the Legion of Doom, Jeff Jarrett's a Hall of Famer. You get appearances by Ken Shamrock, who I believe should be a Hall of Famer, Ron Simmons, Farouk, The Rock, Triple H, Chyna, X-Pac, Val Venus, who not necessarily a Hall of Famer, but I can see him getting in. He's right there on the cusp of that. You know, you got legendary characters like Jim Cornette, who should be a Hall of Famer. Kane's a Hall of Famer. The New Age Outlaws are Hall of Famers. Cactus Jack and Chainsaw Charlie, a.k.a. Terry Funk, Hall of Famers. So you can see you have some of the most legendary characters and wrestlers of the time period, and this was basically an hour and a half without commercials, because it's narrowed down for 2 hours. Really, really solid episode of Raw. I would definitely put it in my personal top 5 Raws of all time. I thought this was fantastic. This set the bar for what a Raw after WrestleMania could and should be. A reset for the company, a beginning of new storylines going forward, an ending of old storylines coming in. I'm going to give this show altogether, I'm going to give it a solid 5. I know there were some matches that are lesser. The Kurgan and Chains match is probably the worst match on the card. And the thing about it is, even with that being a bad match, it didn't overstay its welcome because it was under 5 minutes long. So basically, the whole thing, to me, it moved quick, everything made sense, and yes, I do generally like a longer, better storytelling match in the ring, but they told good stories in the short matches as well here. I thought this was an awesome episode of Raw. Let me know what you think. If you remember this, if you're going to go back and watch it, smash that like button, hit the share button, comment on this. If you're not subscribed and you like what you see here, so please subscribe. And if you've got this far into the video, I know that you like this, and I know you like what we're doing here. Let me know you watched all the way to the end. Put Attitude in the comments here, because this is really one of the high points of the Attitude Era. With all that being said, my name is George Coles, and this has been another episode of It Came From the Network.